I've been battling with the truckster steering. It is very, very hard to turn the wheel. The geometry has been altered from original, and some of it they did a good job on, and some of it not so good. But anyway, I got another video coming out on that. I don't know, it might come out before this one. I don't really know. But anyway, I thought one way I could get a mechanical advantage was just to get a bigger steering wheel. Now I can't go too big because you got to have some room for your lap, but I thought I'd get a little bit of a bigger steering wheel and have one that is better, easier to grip. The other one's kind of skinny and it's hard plastic. So I looked for a while on the local, the next door marketplace and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't see anything. So I said, self, let's just make one. How hard can it be? So I'm making one. I had a piece of flat bar that was actually new material, had never been boogered up or welded on or anything. Cut it to the length, and I'm using my little homemade roller machine here to roll it into a circle. Now this machine is kind of marginal. It lacks mechanical advantage, but it works. So when you're bending something light, you can bend it. You just got to be patient. It suffers the drive wheel's too big and the crank's too short, and you really got to put a lot of sweat equity into it, but it does roll a nice consistent curve. So I rolled a band. It's about 1.5 inches bigger than the existing steering wheel. And when you roll with this machine or any machine, the last couple inches don't get rolled. So you make the steel long and then you cut off that part. It's kind of flat in cross section. And I overlapped it where I thought it looked good, and I cut through both layers. Cut through both layers, and I put them back in the vise, and I welded it together, and I ground the weld smooth. And then we had to start to a wheel. And as typical of my projects, I have no plans, no drawings. I just knew I needed something round, and I needed steel. If I could have rolled a round pipe, I would just made the steering wheel out of that, but I can't do that. So I rolled a flat bar, and I'm going to build it up with wood on both sides to make it a steering wheel. Just need to weld that crack up. It should be pretty straight.
All right, I got it welded and kind of cleaned up. It's very round. This is the weld right here. You can kind of see it. I may go run it through the roller again and see if that helps it. No, it's good enough.
This is the tow rail, or a tow rail, off that Grand Banks I cut up about 10 years ago. It's an incredibly beautiful piece of wood, but of very limited use because it's a curve and it's got holes every 10 inches. But it will work good, I think, for laminating wood around my new steering wheel. So I'm going to cut it, boom, 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 and have a whole bunch of segments, and we'll glue them up there. I'm kind of like out of my comfort zone here, but what I did was I drew the circle on a piece of plywood, or actually I traced it. It's not exactly round, it's pretty close though. And I put a center mark, and I dropped one of my little sections like here, and I drew a pencil mark toward the middle and cut it. So this is what I got. Now, I'm not going to try to make equal sections all the way around. That's like way above my skill level. I'm going to go around until I get to the end and maybe just 2 or 3. But this will get me started. And now I'm going to put the circle on top of here and mark it. And all I need is like, I don't know, a 1/2 inch on each side. The rest is going to be waste. So yeah, this will be interesting. And I think I will cut them. I wonder if I should glue them all together and then cut the circle, or cut each one in. I think I'll cut each one individually and clamp them. First cut, not too good. Some pretty big cracks in there. Maybe I'll set up the belt sander upside down and fit each one individually, and then if I move them around, they're not gonna fit anymore. This is gonna be a little project here. Okay, I got 5 blocks cut. I actually got better. You really got to follow the line, because even a
64th makes it not fit well. And I was using the belt sander like a little table sander and making them fit better. And now I'm past the halfway point. So I put the straight edge across from the center, and I'm gonna trim this pair and this pair so they'll be directly across the center line from each other. I'm gonna glue these 5, and I'm gonna do the next 5 at another time. And I'll cut the first one this length, and hopefully when I get around, the last one will be this length, and I don't think that'll be noticeable actually. So I drilled a bajillion holes in the frame to help the epoxy holes. I may end up having to pin them after I get them cut, rounded, or whatever. So I'm gonna glue. I'm gonna glue them up. I'm gonna mix some dark. No, I'm just gonna glue them. Okay, all epoxied up. I painted it with epoxy, and then I painted it again with thickened epoxy. And I got it clamped, and I'm scared to touch it because it might move. But yeah, pretty good for just a thought. 2 hours ago, I just thought about this, so now we're halfway around with the gluing. We'll have a lot of sanding and cutting ahead of us, but yeah, this might be interesting. And the whole reason I'm doing this is because I think adding the extra 2 inches of diameter is going to make the truckster easier to turn for my wife. Well, for me too. All right, first glue up, first half successful. I'm going to start marking the blocks for the second half and glue it up. And then I think I'll cut the outside diameter because that one will be easier to sand than the inside, and then maybe do the inside with the router and some sort of jig. And cut the outside with the bandsaw. So, all right, let's move forward. Second side ready to glue up, and I'm definitely getting better. My fits on the second half are much better than the first half, but oh well. And if I were to do this again, I would pass each block on a planer a couple times, because getting the clamps to hold on this curve is kind of a pain in the rear end. But too late now, it's done. I'm gonna take it apart and slobber some epoxy on there and tint the thickened epoxy with sawdust so it'll be brown, and put it away for a day.
So teak is well known for not wanting to glue well. It has natural oils, the ones that preserve it. That's the reason it lasts so long out in the weather. But those tend to upset the gluing system and keep the gluing from sticking. So when I belt sanded these curves for final fit, it was super rough. I think I have a 36 grit belt on the sander, so I have a lot of mechanical adhesion with the roughness. And I painted 1 coat of neat epoxy or unthickened epoxy, and let it sit a little bit, and a lot of that soaked in, especially the end grain. And then I thickened up my epoxy with super fine sawdust from the random orbital sander bag, and that was more, so that's more of a gap filling part of the glue up. Now, everybody who's watched my videos know my hands shake. It's an essential tremor disorder. 95% of the time, it doesn't bother me. I'm just, I've been doing it so many years. But on this glue up, it was driving me crazy. Between the sliminess of the epoxy and me not getting rid of the rounded edges on these little blocks and my old worn out clamps, I was, yeah, this was something. I did ended up getting it all glued. But yeah, it was not pretty.
Stop, record. All right, all glued up, turned it over, had some embarrassingly large cracks in it. I filled them with epoxy, and we're gonna let it harden. This is one of those projects where if I had to go buy this stuff, I probably either wouldn't be doing it or I'd be taking a little more care. But I'm just playing here. If it works, it's going to be kind of cool. If it don't work, it's going to go in the garbage. We'll do something else. All glued up. I'm going to do a partial belt sanding to flatten it out a little bit so I can scribe my circles. Then after I cut off the waste, I'll do the final belt sanding. I won't have to remove quite so much material. It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough right now, but you just wait. This is some beautiful wood. Now I probably could have set up some sort of jig with a center point and made a compass to scribe the circle. But chances are this steel band is not totally round. I mean, it's close. It's really close, but it's probably not exactly round. So all I did was to scribe a little more than a ½ inch bigger than the steel all the way around so that this distance here will match. Even if the band's not totally round, it'll look round. So I'm gonna go cut it with the bandsaw, maybe cut it a tad big, and it belt sands pretty fast. So then I can, when I get the outside looking good, I can scribe the inside. Kind of amazing. It didn't even break or crumble or anything. And I got a circle ready for the belt sander. Okay, belt sander made really quick work of straightening that out. It's just 36 grit, so I'll have to sand it some more. Actually, with a half round on both sides, there won't be a whole lot of that showing. So now with the outside kind of roundy, pretty much roundy, I took the marking gauge and I scribed a little line all the way around. Just have to follow the outside. And I'm gonna cut this, unfortunately, with the jigsaw because I can't get the bandsaw on the interior space. But I will put a new blade in it and it should cut pretty square. Let's do it. No, it didn't cut plumb. It did not cut plumb at all. It is way out of square. Very disappointing. Well, we definitely have a top and a bottom. The top's not too bad. The bottom's not too good. I'm not even going to show it to you. But when I do the roundovers, it's going to make it look better. There, look, quick. Okay, now I'm going to take the belt sander and flatten it to the steel on both sides. And I think I'm going to put a rivet on each end of each one of these deals. Just was going to be inside, I wouldn't need it. And I did drill a bunch of holes, so we have some place for the epoxy to grab. But since it quite well be left in the outside one day, I want to make sure it's not going to come apart. if you can see that, but it's distressed a little bit. Okay, just got to do that a whole bunch of more times. Okay, I got my 20 rivets. Peened, cut, peened, driven, cut, peened some more, and then lightly sanded around the circumference. And if it looks a little wonky, that's an optical illusion. It is perfect. Now I'm going to put the router and round these edges over and do a lot of sanding, and probably hold off for now until I find out if the truckster is even going to steer with the parts I'm trying to put in the steering box. But anyway, it's been interesting. Learned some new tricks like making rivets. I ran the router around the inside and the outside on both planes, both surfaces. And I did some sanding, 80, 100, and 120, and I put a coat of epoxy on it just to protect it, because I'm going to bring it to the foundry and everything over there is greasy. And this wood would have had grease spots on it, and then they would have never come out. So next step, I think, will be to mount it in the hub, and then I'll do a couple of final coats, sand it better, and then put some spar varnish to protect the epoxy from sun, because epoxy doesn't do well in the sun. Spar varnish is supposed to do better. Doesn't always. Big decisions here. I need to mount the new wheel on the old spokes. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to make all the inside parts new. I'm thinking right now, what I'm thinking is, I know there's steel inside this plastic. So if I were to drill through the wood, tap the metal, and screw a bolt in like this with a nice round head, I think that'd be pretty strong. If these are too short, but if they're a little longer, then I could weld them onto these three things, and maybe even ferret out with some plastic. I don't know. Okay, big leap of faith here. I'm gonna cut the hoop off the metal part. No going back now. Okay, the rim is off. Cuts easy. Just got to watch out for flying molten plastic, which will burn the CRAP out of you. So now I'm going to cut on the inside of the blue tape. I'm going to cut just the plastic. I'm going to try not to grind into the metal. And I'm going to try to get the plastic off, and then I'll cut the weld right here. So then I'll have this much straight. I'll have this much straight steel sticking out to attach to that some kind of way. Not sure yet. All right, so I'm going to cut this. Yeah, I need to clamp it. I can't hold it by hand. There we go. Just what the doctor ordered. Okay, progress on the demolition of the old steering wheel. I think all I need to do now is cut these off. And then go buy some bolts to put through here. And I might even, this is going to be kind of flimsy, I might even overlap them, weld them overlapped, and then encase it with some plastic. I think the plastic was a large part of the strength of this thing. So I got the hub, I call it upside down, and I weighted it so it won't move. And then I slid the wheel around until I had the same measurement from here to here, all three places. Pretty close. And I turned it until I had the best spot to drill the 3 holes. Now this one's going to come out real close to the brass rivet. This one's real close to the brass rivet, but it's the best I could do. I didn't want to drill in a joint. Anyway, I moved it around a bunch of times, and that's what it's going to be. So now I took a straight edge and marked across. So now I need to go buy my 3 bolts and drill and tap. Yeah, it's coming along. And I think I will overlap these and then encase them in some kind of plastic. Because I think just a straight bar like this size can be kind of flimsy. Because you got to crank on that thing pretty hard. Probably a small bit all the way through. And eventually I need to drill, I think it's 17/64 is the right drill size for a 5/16 tap. I got the bolts ordered, they're not here. So I'm going to drill and tap these, and then sand and put another coat of epoxy while I'm waiting for the bolts to come.
I snatched my wife's scale out of her studio, and I'm using it to mix small amounts of epoxy because it's really hard to measure. So I can measure like a half ounce of each different product and mix them up, not have a lot of waste. So I try to always use a scale when I'm mixing a little bit.
So we drilled and tapped the holes. I put studs in the holes. I sprayed the studs with a release agent so the epoxy wouldn't stick, hopefully. And I sanded to 120, and I put another coat of epoxy. And now I can't touch it for the rest of the day. In a minute, I'm gonna pick it up and take it outside because I think there's gonna be less dust out there. But it's it for the day. Besides, I don't have my bolts. They might be in tomorrow, maybe. I am ready to weld the steering wheel hub to the new bolts that came in the mail yesterday. So in order to try to get it as straight as possible, I bolted this to the table. There's a hole in the table. Sorry, a hole like this one. Got a nut on the bottom. This stud's sticking straight up. Put the hub right there and tighten down a nut on top of it. And tighten down the nut on top of it. Okay, time out. Okay, tighten the nut down on the top. It's really in there. And I measured from the table to the top of these little studs all the way around and bent them a little bit until they were all 2 3/16 off the table. So now I've got these 3 scraps of aluminum, and they're all exactly the same thickness because they all came in the same piece of bar. Put that there. Put the wheel on top of those. Time out. Okay, so if I set the wheel on the 3 blocks and play with the studs, it looks like this one needs to be bent that a ways, which I haven't had any trouble bending them so far. And height-wise, this one needs to come up a little bit. I'll get them close, and I'm starting measuring the radius. Knock it around until it fits, and I'm gonna weld this, and then I'm gonna encase this in some kind of plastic to make it look less like a goober. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm bending the studs a little bit at a time until they all fit correctly, and then I will play with the radiuses and tap it around. And when I get it good, I'll put a little TIG weld on each one, or a lot of TIG weld on each one. With this little flat bar in the vise, it lets me bend the studs without cracking the wood. It's like a hard point, and it works pretty good. Haven't cracked the wood at all. I think I got it as good as I'm going to get it. I think it's level. I think it's concentric. I think it's grounded. I'm assuming this metal is connected to the metal in the middle, so in which case this is bolted to the table, and the table's grounded. So I'm gonna take a little bit, put a wet rag on it, cool it off real quick, and that may be all I do until I install it on the car and spin it and see if it looks wonky or not. But I'm gonna at least get 3 pretty good tigs and maybe flip it over and TIG the other side too. Yeah, this is good. All right, start the TIG gun up, and I'm using stainless steel wire. This is 316 to steel. I think I'm supposed to use 309 rods, but I don't have that. I have 316, so we'll do with that.
So a lot of talking and a lot of planning, but I went ahead and welded them 100%, top and bottom and down both sides. And now I'm making something to contain the liquid plastic that I'm going to wrap the weld and both metal parts with. This is oil-based clay. My wife buys it by the freaking 50-pound box. And I'm just trying to, just got a semicircle under there, just something to hold it. I know I'm going to have to sculpt it or sand it to shape, but I don't want it to leak all over the place. So did one on each side and called it good. Put the plastic on it. So this is the 2-part liquid plastic that my wife purchases to make mother molds with. It is not as strong as epoxy, but it's real pleasant to work with compared to epoxy. Now I have loaded it up with fiberglass fibers to give it some strength. And I loaded it up with some polyfiber to make it non-sag, so I could kind of build the top half up. And I'm just sticking it in there, trying to minimize the cavities underneath the steel, and trying to get enough on top so that after I sand it, I'll have enough.
And that is really, really ugly. I'm just hoping that it will, well, I know it'll cure and get hard, and it'll be fairly strong because it's got a lot of fiberglass fibers in it. And I'm hoping that I can sand it down and make it look sort of decent and then paint it black. I mixed red and blue coloring with it. The product is white, but I thought if I made it purple, it would be easier to paint black over it later on. So leave it be. Can't touch it for a few hours. It's not as slow setting as epoxy, but yeah, it's going to take a couple hours. Well, it got hard. Same day. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We poured this in the morning, and it was very hot today. It is very hot today. So, wonder what we got. Wonder what we got. Clay is like mushy. It's so warm. So warm. It's a mess. Promising. Let me turn the camera off and make some progress. I'll turn it back on. Well, I got most of the clay off, and it seems to be pretty solid, so I have something to work with. It's going to be hard to sand because that clay is going to get hot and melt and ruin the sandpaper. But let's see. Let's try. Let's start shaping it up a little bit. This is the front side, and it was poured into the clay, and this is the back side, and it was just dabbed on there. So we need to do some removing of some excess. This actually came out better than I thought it was going to come out, for sure. I got some divots that I need to put some filler in. I think I'm going to wait till I go to the foundry because I have some Total Fair which is an epoxy product, and it's really easy to sand. And I may smear it all over all these surfaces. But shoot, yeah, came out pretty good. Now, it's a little wonky if you want to get like super technical, like that one kind of makes a right-hand turn. But better than I thought it was going to come out, for sure. Put the total fair, that's the green stuff on there, 4 days ago, and it's been sitting. I hope the blue tape will come off. But it's time to give it a final sanding and start the, I don't have the varnish, but I can paint the middle part black. All right, we have given it its final sanding. Well, I don't know about that. We sanded it again. It's really hard to get this transition between the plastic and the wood like perfect. So it's not perfect. I ended up cutting it with the razor knife around because it was kind of laying all out. And I've scratched up the epoxy so much, I'm gonna put another full coat of epoxy and go ahead and epoxy the plastic, epoxy everything. I think the epoxy will stick on there better than regular paint. And when that dries, it will give it another light sanding with like 220. And I don't know if I'm gonna do the black first or the varnish. Probably the varnish first, a couple of coats of varnish, a couple of coats of black. And that will mean I have spent many more hours on this project than I should have. But anyway, it's been kind of interesting. All right, so right now, before the bugs and the leaves get on it, it's pretty respectable. Yep, I need to go get some spar varnish, some exterior varnish tomorrow at the Home Depot because I do not have any. It needs a couple of coats to protect the epoxy from the sun, and then some plain old black enamel, which I probably have a bunch of. And I got the last seal that I needed for the steering unit in the truckster, so we're going to be making progress on both ends here. Now, a little black paint in the middle, we are done. Kind of a pretty wheel for that nasty old truckster, but this is the one going on it. Kind of brings up that old proverbial question: if you put a silk ear in a sow's purse, is she still a pig? Thanks for watching.